Good morning. My name is Keith McLaughlin, and I serve as Provost and Executive Vice President at Morton College, just outside of Chicago. And it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you as a member of the National Alliance of Community and Technical Colleges and co-host of this year's two-part NACTC Summer Webinar Series. I'm also joined in welcoming you by my good friend and colleague, Dr. Mark Curtis Chavez, Provost of the College of DuPage, also located near Chicago. COD is also serving as a co-host of today's webinar, and we featured in the video just highlights of the outstanding programs that they have at that institution. We thank you for joining us and for your interest in this very important and timely issue of the impact of COVID-19 on Black male students. For those of you perhaps not familiar or new to the National Alliance of Community and Technical Colleges, we are comprised of progressive community colleges dedicated to facilitating the sharing of ideas and programs, as we are doing so today. The organization emphasizes networking, problem solving, and cooperative efforts toward addressing issues of common concern in community and technical colleges throughout the United States. We are led by a board of member colleges, and the president of NACTC, Dr. Mike McCall. Mike is a nationally recognized leader in community and technical colleges, having served as founding president of the Kentucky Community College and Technical College System. Dr. McCall also served as president of South Carolina's Comprehensive Technical College System. I would also like to recognize our current chair of the board of directors of the Alliance, Dr. Kenneth Ray, who serves as vice president of student services and student enrollment at Hillsborough Community College in Florida. NACTC also partners with a number of companies that specialize in various products and services to support the work and mission of community colleges. And before we begin, we invited our corporate sponsor for today's seminar, EduNav, to take a few moments to share about the work of their company in the higher ed space. We are joined today by Andrew Brown, President and Chief Executive Officer of EduNav. As CEO of EduNav, Andrew has developed a company mission centered on student, academic, career, and equity outcomes, combined with the development of solutions to drive greater institutional efficiency. EduNav works with 2- and 4-year schools across the country, ranging in size from a few thousand students to nearly 100,000 students. Andrew has an MBA from Harvard Business School and a Bachelor's of Science with a double major in economics and mathematics from Bristol University in England. He lives in San Francisco with his wife and 2 teenage boys. We want to thank EduNav for their generous support of the Alliance in today's webinar. So Andrew, we would like to invite you to share about the types of services your company provides to colleges and universities. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Keith. And thank you everyone for allowing us this opportunity to talk with you today. I'm going to show you a few slides. I'm going to try and not make this too sales centric, but I would like to share kind of some of the things that we've put into our mission for what we're trying to achieve with our customers and partners. And think of this as kind of the start of conversations with some of you, and we'd love the opportunity to talk with you about what we do. So EduNav, we're a technology company, and we focus on graduating more students. You know, our goal is to help more students cross the finishing line. And finishing line to us means both kind of an academic result, but it also means building skills, career advancement, and then specifically kind of equity outcomes. And I'll talk a little bit about that. You know, where did EduNav come from? You know, we focus, as I said, on career equity and completion, and the data in the market suggests that there's an opportunity to do things differently and better. And completion rates are too low. We think there's a way to use technology to help with skill development, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then it's not a level playing field. The demographic platform, if you like, is not at the point where everyone's graduating at the same rates. Interestingly, many of our schools have demographics that skew towards Black Americans and Hispanics. In fact, 60% roughly of students using EduNav technology today are Hispanic or Black in the United States. And we think of that as an opportunity as well as an obligation to further kind of our goals. In our mission, as I said, there's kind of two sets. There's the sort of student success kind of outcome. And again, we think about student success as completion, but we think of completion more broadly. We think of it as career advancement and then equity inclusion outcomes. And so we're working pretty tirelessly now with a set of partners to further these goals. There's a second component of what we're trying to achieve, which is using the information from our technologies to help optimize resources, both at the school level, so improving decision-making and resource allocations at a school level, but then also at a network level, kind of across schools. We do that with a set of products, and I'm going to talk very quickly at a high level about our core product, which is our academic planning product today. Smart Plan is our kind of academic planning product, and I'll show you a couple of screenshots of that. Summit is a tool that helps more students complete, and then Insights is essentially leveraging the data from the Smart Plan product. The big difference between our planning technology and other academic planning approaches is fairly simple. Other planners don't really plan. Our product plans. And when I talk about planning, what I'm talking about is building an academic plan for a student. Other planning technologies, they take information, provide templates, they inform decision-making to help a student with an advisor build a plan. EduNav technology actually builds a plan. So we take inputs, we're always solving for the best plan, we're creating a personalized plan, we're updating it automatically. And our planning technology takes into account as variables change. Everything changes all the time. Our technology keeps students on track. Think of it as like Google Maps. Essentially, we take the inputs, we define the goal, student wants to graduate in a degree in history, and then we build a plan to get that student there in the quickest possible time. And the plan is always up to date. It's updating based on those changing variables. So it's very dynamic. This is where our technology is different than other capabilities in the marketplace. And I'm lucky enough, Dr. Ken Ray with Hillsborough Community College has been a partner of ours now for, I think, 3 years, and they've been a fantastic partner, helping us not just achieve results, but also helping us build the product. Dr. Ray and his team have provided us incredibly valuable information to inform how we build our product, and has given us extreme exposure to people who have given us the insights to build better technology. And I appreciate the support that Dr. Ray has given us. We have results. Different schools have achieved kind of improvements in completion rates. Advisors have seen improvement in efficiency by taking away some of that planning capability and putting it in the hands of technology. Advisors can spend more time on high valued activities. We're seeing improvements in completion rates across many of our schools. And we're working with a set of schools across the country, both 2- and 4-year schools. As Keith said, schools ranging in a few thousand students all the way up to tens of thousands. And this is part of our mission. So that's the summary of who we are and where we're at. I'd love it to find ways to talk with all of you about what we do. We have a webinar coming up, and I'll see that you get that information. But by all means, kind of let me know if there's anything you'd like to understand better about EduNav, and love the opportunity to start that dialogue. And again, with that, I'll kind of back out now, and hope the rest of the webinar call here goes very well for all of you. So again, thank you very much.
Andrew, thank you very much, and thank you again to EduNav for your support of the Alliance and today's webinar.
You're welcome.
At this time, I will turn it over to the moderator of today's webinar, Dr. Linda Garcia, Executive Director of of the Center for Community College Student Engagement at the University of Texas at Austin. And I want to thank Linda on behalf of the Alliance for her willingness to take the time out of her busy schedule to moderate today's panel. Dr. Garcia will introduce the members of our very distinguished panel today. So Linda, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. McLaughlin. I am happy to be today's monitor. During our time together, if you have any questions, just please type them in the chat box. You'll see it on the bottom of your screen, and we'll reserve some time at the end of the panel discussion to go over those questions. Let me just touch base a little bit about what CESI has been doing as the foundation for today's conversation. This past spring, CESI released a report on the impacts of COVID-19 on the entering students in the community colleges. Slightly over 5,100 entering students from 38 colleges participated in the survey. And I want to share 3 notable data points with you. The first one is 57% of the respondents said they didn't know if the college had support services to help them cope with stress related to the pandemic. 57%. The second data point is 25% had trouble accessing the internet because it was not reliable or they just did not have it at home. The third data point is 23% said they changed their plans about college, meaning they planned to attend a different community college, or they had a plan to originally attend a 4-year college or university, or they just had no plans at all to attend any college or university. That's 23% of the students. Before this report came out, we did another survey about the impacts of COVID on the student experience, on the onset of the pandemic last spring. And what we learned is that there was a subgroup of students who experienced the most challenges, and those were Black students. They experienced more challenges with accessing technology. They even said that if they did have technology, they had to share it with someone in their home, with a family member, whomever was living with them. Or they also had a challenge with just having enough food for themselves and family. So today's panelists will speak more in depth about how just the pandemic continues to impact the progress of these students. Let me introduce today's panelists. Joining us today is Dr. Guy Generals, who's the president of Community College of Philadelphia, Dr. William Haidt, who is the superintendent of the School District of Philadelphia, Mr. Derek Perkins, who's the project director of the Center for Male Engagement at the Community College of Philadelphia, and Dr. Kenneth Ray, who's the vice president of student services and enrollment management for Hillsborough Community College in Tampa, Florida. And as you heard earlier today, Dr. Ray is also the NACTC board chair. Dr. Generals, I'll hand the panel discussion over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Garcia or Linda. I think we can drop some of the formalities here. We're all amongst friends. Thank you for the backdrop. I think it's really important to look at the data and utilize the data as a strategy for solving some of the problems. It's my hope that through the discussion today, we can further spotlight or point out where the problems lie relative to the pandemic, but then move into a conversation about what some of the possible solutions are moving forward. I think what you laid out was quite accurate. Those of us who are in higher ed know that even prior to the pandemic, there were equity gaps as it relates to students of color versus, the quote unquote traditional or white students. And of course, this is pervasive, not just in education, but in terms of job outcomes, medical provisions, economics, throughout our society. That there have been equity gaps between Black students and white students. So the pandemic not only showcased in profound ways, but it also exacerbated, obviously, those gaps. When I look at the data from CCP, and I welcome, as we get into the conversation, those of you who are seeing similar things, I start with the idea that even before the pandemic, only about 15% of our entire population are men of color, are Black men. I think that's a startling statistic. How can we get them to the finish line if they're not even here? How can we help them be successful if they're not at the college? That number has dropped precipitously, as has the enrollment with, throughout the college. So that's problem number one. But then when you look at some of the other indicators of success, the graduation rates for men of color, the 150% rate, which most of us, use as a benchmark, is 8.7% versus white male students, it's 19%. So almost double. Retention rate for Black students is 30%. That's 1 year retention rate. For white male students is 45%. Remedial and need of remediation, 3 levels of remediation, reading, writing, and math. For Black students, it's 27%. For white students, it's 13%. So we had a problem even before the pandemic hit. The pandemic has exacerbated problems profoundly. We know through some of the data that's produced by McKinsey that there are 3 basic reasons why Black students in general, but particularly Black men or Black students don't succeed. One is finances. There's always an issue with finances. You can't disconnect their basic needs, social needs, food security needs, shelter needs, and so forth from their educational needs and opportunities. So finance is one. Preparedness is another one. And I'm glad we have my brother Bill Height here who can talk about how prepared students are coming and what's being done to ensure that preparation, which speaks to that 3 levels of remediation. And they're not, by the way, Bill, they're not all coming out of the school district. Our population is quite ubiquitous. And then the other is the community support. If the community was completely disrupted because of the pandemic, their parents, their neighbors, their stores, whatever support they may have had prior to, if it's been completely disrupted, but because of the pandemic, you can imagine what it's done in terms of their abilities. Some of the problems you hinted at, the digital divide, according to McKinsey, even students that had digital devices, there was a difference in terms of the quality and the accessibility of those devices. They had to share them, or they had to, they were just less reliable. And we spent a ton of money, as I'm sure most of you on this call have, loaning out digital devices, laptops. But even still, there's a 3 to 4% difference between Black students and white students relative to the reliability. They have to share, they don't have a place of comfort, and so forth. And then even beyond that, there's a 6% level of reliability gap between Black and white students and matters of internet access. So we all know the frustration of being on a call and the screen freezes. Our frustration level is probably pretty high compared to students in general. And then I think what the data has shown is that there's a 6% gap between Black and white students in terms of that internet reliability. As far as, some of the data, the historical data, as well as current data, there's an expectation of a 6 months melt with Black students. And on average, all students, there's an expectation of about a 6 months melt as a result of the pandemic. And this is based on other instances of disruption in the educational experience. For low-income students, including Black and brown students, that average is expected to be between 9 and 10 months. Historically, when systems were disrupted, like hurricanes or earthquakes, the drop has been between the number of students that never returned, they just dropped out, was between 14 and 20%. And they looked at like Katrina, they looked at earthquakes, they looked at Haiti, earthquakes and Sandy. 14 to 20% of the students that dropped out never returned. And the expected rate for this pandemic is somewhere between 2 and 9%. So for those of us in college, in the college environment, and are expecting to have students who come through with, a moderate amount of need in the area of remediation and preparation and finances, and a community that's supportive of them, we know we have challenges in front of us. We're now going into year 1.5. All of us are struggling with what to do in September. CCP has made the decision to try to go face-to-face, but we're talking about 50%, and we're still talking about things such as, do we mask, do we not mask? It's going to be a hybrid. So the scenario before us, it's still pretty much disrupted. It's still not back to normal. And I think part of the conversation we need to have today is how are all these things in total going to impact our ability to educate, to train and to move students through their pathways to whatever success, ambitions or aspirations they may have. So I've asked Dr. Height to come and join us today because I don't know if there's any other K-12 expert on here, but I like to think of the educational environment ecosystem as a K-16. You know, we can't do what we do unless we know what's happening in you know, grammar and high school. And we in Philadelphia, we've made every effort to really erase those boundaries. You know, with, you know, our varied dual enrollment programs, our middle college program, and just the fact that we are simpatical as it relates to what the needs are for education and how that bears in the context of Philadelphia. So Bill, thank you for joining us. And I'm going to turn it over to you. I don't know if you have any answers or solutions, but you can speak to what you think is pertinent to our conversation today.
Yeah, I mean, so thank you, Guy. Good morning, everyone. It's glad to be here and to be representative of the K-16 system, as Guy so eloquently stated here in Philadelphia. And much of what Dr. General's just described is what we're also experiencing as a district. And we know that, in fact, we look at our subgroups of young people, and we look at them through the lens of schools that are on track, schools that are near track, and schools that are off track. And we divide the schools into those three subgroups based on where children score on state assessments. And we look at all three state assessments: algebra, English language arts, and biology, and then determine if, in fact, if schools are already meeting those goals, then they are on track, naturally. If they are somewhere within 20% of that goal, they are near track. And then if they are 21% or beyond, away from that goal, then quite naturally they're off track. So needless to say, we have 57 high schools here. And if you think about on track, then the on track schools are 7 of those schools. Then there are another 14 schools in the near track and then the off track. But what's interesting, and what as Guy was talking, what he reminded me of is the makeup of the populations in those respective schools. And if you then look at the populations of students, quite frankly, in the on-track schools, those 7 that are already meeting the state assessments, and the children there are scoring the highest. At the on-track schools, on average, they have the lowest percentages of Black, African American, or Hispanic and Latinx students, and the highest percentages of white students. So just wanted you to have some context. In the near track schools, they have a higher percentage of Black African American students and Hispanic Latinx students, and a white student population of about 13%. At the off-track schools that make up the vast majority of our high schools, then they have the highest rate of Black African American, just 58%, almost 59%, and 25% are Hispanic, Latinx, and then only 7.8% are white. Now, I say all of that to just give you some context for how we are actually looking at the issues associated with disproportionality, particularly as it relates to our young people, their families, and their communities. And there are lots of reasons for these types of things. And the reasons could be housing patterns, could be the circumstances associated with poverty, could be how we have created structures, unfortunately, through years and years of trying to ensure that we have options for students, where we have accelerated the opportunities to have these types of disproportionate impacts, where we've created magnet schools, and those magnet schools only attract a certain population of students. So I give you all of that to say that there are a lot of, naturally, there are things that could be causal, and then there's a causation based on other factors that, quite frankly, are out of our control. And as you think about the pandemic, And as Guy was describing the experiences around the community college, if you think about the pandemic and its impact on it, the pandemic disproportionately impacted those off-track and near-track schools more than the schools that are on track. And the on-track schools had organizations or school support groups that could actually do things that those young people would otherwise not experience with or without the district. The near-track schools in some cases may have been able to do that. In the off-track schools, if it didn't happen, if the district didn't provide that resource, that support, that service, that behavioral health counseling, the medication, the meals, then those young people would not have had access to those resources. And so as you think about what has been exacerbated as a part of the pandemic, we know right off the bat that we lost about 6,000 students, and that's out of a population of over 130,000 students that we educate in the district-run public schools. We also have another 70,000 in public charter schools. But in the district-run schools, we lost about 6,000 students. What we know is about 3,000 of those students were kindergartners, where families just pulled them out or did not enroll them. But the vast majority of the other students were really Black or students of color, Black African-American students, Hispanic, Latinx students who were in those critically important high school years that have just disengaged. And to the description that we heard earlier about Katrina and other types of natural disasters and what that does to our student populations, that actually is something that we experience as a part of the pandemic. So with 3,000 of the kindergartners, and if there's a benefit there, the benefit is we know who they are and we know how to connect with their families. The other 3,000 or so students who have, quite frankly, disengaged, it's much harder to find those young people, as they could be transient, mobile. They may not have access to service. They may have to go to work. They may have done something else. They may have gone off to the community college to get their GED. And so there are multiple things that have impacted this. But one of the things here, at least in Philadelphia, that we are trying to do is, one, look at all of the factors that are addressing the disproportionality. And we, like many school districts and urban centers, had to provide a lot more resources for young people just to create the circumstances and conditions for those young people to be educated during the pandemic. So we had to provide everyone with a computer. We had to provide everyone with reliable internet service. We had to provide, in some cases, a reliable internet service and mobile devices because there were multiple children in the home. We have now distributed some 10 million meals in and across the city to young people, behavioral health services then to impact those young people who have been impacted or affected by trauma with the amount of gun violence that's occurring here and in many urban centers. But in addition, there are things that we're trying to do here at the school district. Number one, to understand what factors are we creating with our staffing patterns, our budget patterns, our resource patterns, but in addition, create other opportunities for young people. And Guy, he talked about us being simpatico on these issues, but we are focused intently on trying to come up with a way to think about education, the broader landscape of education as a K-16 cycle, where we know young people will need some form of post-secondary education in order to be successful. And we think that the community college is a valuable partner in that work. But then two, we have then looked at the things that we can do together to provide access and opportunity for the young people that we serve. And so we created what became the first middle college here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and the only one here in the city of Philadelphia, where we graduated the first class of young people together from the school district of Philadelphia and the community college of Philadelphia, where 90 of the 94 students who enrolled in that program graduated both with a high school diploma and an associate's degree. But the key to that is 60% of those young people are first generation college students, and that's intentional. And so that's one path of trying to solve the problem. The other path is how do we think more broadly about workforce development so that those young people who may have disengaged, those young adults who will become adults who may then re-enter the community college landscape, how do we create a structure here to create workforce development opportunities for those young people? And really excited to continue working with the Community College of Philadelphia to address that issue, especially since they're building this great new facility for workforce development. So with that, Guy, I'll hand it back to you and be happy to engage in the conversation or to respond to questions.
Sure, that was great backdrop. So we know what we're up against. When students come to the college, Black students, especially male students, Black male students, one of the programs that we have for them is the Center for Male Engagement, which is now called I Am More. And our leader who's received national recognition for that is Derek Perkins. And so Derek, I wonder if you could speak to some of the emotional luggage that's coming with the student needs and, you know, all of the needs that they have if they find a way to get here, you know, if they are still determined, which many of them are. What do we do to, you know, to try to support them? And what are the impediments that you're seeing relative to the pandemic?
Thank you, Dr. Generals, and the opportunity to speak with everyone today. So I'm very glad that Dr. Height really stressed the point of changing the paradigm from K-12 to K-16, K-16, because what we see with our particular students is that majority of our students are prepared to enter college, but they're not prepared to complete college, right? And that has a lot to do just in terms of their preparation. When we're looking at a lot of our students, actually 70% of our students have to take at least one developmental course, which means, of course, they're not academically prepared. And if they don't pass that that developmental course within the first year, then those students are less likely to return to the college. So what we've done just in terms of our programming is being really intentional, holistic, but also culturally responsive to our needs of our students. And so what we wanted to do when we did, with the initial design of the program, we ask students what they need, right? Because I think too often is that we as adults or as administrators, we try to decide what is in the best interest of our students without asking for their input, and then wonder why the program is not designed to meet those particular needs. And so what we did, again, talk to our students and what are those particular things that you need in order to be successful here at the college. And so what we've done as our particular program, we made sure that students all had a support coach. And that support coach is their students' lifeline on campus and as well as off campus, and helping the student navigate the life circumstances that they find themselves in. Because we know that what happens off campus has a direct impact on what happens in the classroom. And so we want to make sure that we're able to address those particular needs with our students. And also too, around the emotional trauma, I know that Dr. Height mentioned this too, particularly for a number of our students who are dealing with not only emotional trauma in mental health, depression, and disassociation that they experienced during the pandemic, but also too, just in terms of the gun violence that we were speaking of, but also too, in terms of the social justice that we have experienced within the past year and a half, and how all of that has an impact on our students. So when students come to the college, they bring in all that with them to the college as well. And so what we need to do and what we have done with our program is really ask different questions just in terms of how we support students. So not why aren't you here, but what are we not doing as an institution to make it safe for you to be here? So that's moving from a deficit-based model, right, into this really being student-centered model, and so that we can meet our students where they need, wherever they come from. So we know that a number of our students come from the School District of Philadelphia, but we also have a number of students who are adult learners who come with different competing priorities, and how to best navigate those students, help them navigate that process as well. We talk about a lot about our academic support that we provide our students, which is important in terms of our tutoring, right? And not just providing tutoring, but we also help our students to understand how to be tutored, right? So we provide them access around that. We do a lot of work around our career development, making sure that students have a clear understanding of what their major is and what their career goals, and have an idea to be able to explore what some of those connections are, so that work is experiential and is meaningful for our students. We also do a lot of work around our leadership development and life skills, which I think is important for our students to see themselves as leaders, not only particularly in the classrooms, but particularly in their communities, and as well as mentorship, right? Because we know that if a student has one trusted person in the college or within their support system, they're more likely to be retained and supported. And so these are some of the things that we do just in terms of our programming, as well as, of course, provide social and cultural enrichment, which I think is essential for our students. It's important for our students to see themselves not only as a citizen of Philadelphia, but a global citizen. And if they see themselves in different spaces, that allows them to be able to think differently, look differently, walk differently, talk differently, but more important, be prepared differently. But there's also too, when they are in those particular spaces, that's particularly being from minority population, for those that are majority to see themselves in those spaces as well, right? So you have to not just tolerate us, right? You have to understand in ways that you would have to adapt your particular thoughts and processes, and so that you're not replicating different systemic inequities that our students are experiencing throughout their particular lives. So those are the kind of things that we do just in terms of our programming. One thing that and critical is it's important for us is that student needs to know that that we care about them, right? And then what care actually looks like in practice. So it's much more just in terms of what we do, but why we're doing it, and explaining to our students why, right? And so what we do with our programming and as we engage with our Black males is making sure that one, that whatever we do just in terms of our programming, that they help inform it, which is critical, but two, that is not only reflected in our program, but what we also do is make sure that those same best practices are done throughout the college and find ways to integrate that, right? So we know that faculty are one of those critical aspects of have the greatest connection with our students because they spend the most time with our students. So we also spend a lot of time too working with our faculty and staff, particularly around diversity, inclusion, and equity work, so that they are better prepared better prepared just in terms of their designing their curriculum, inclusive syllabi, the classroom management, and those particular things, right? Which is things important. And also too, the levels of engagement. In our students' experience and talking to our students, what a lot of them have mentioned is that when they come to the college and they come in different classes, is that we treat them, we'll give them the right to fail, rather than give them the right to succeed. So if they don't engage in us in ways that we think is appropriate, then we assume that they're not interested in being in college or disengaged from the process. But I have not met a Black male who's been a part of my program, who applied, who did the admission process, completed the financial aid, met with a counselor and advisor, registered for their classes, waited in a long line for books to go into a classroom with the idea that they're going to fail, right? And so if they don't meet our particular understanding of open engagement means, then what it means is that they're not necessarily meeting our expectations, they're not meeting our ego. And so what we try to do is, again, talk to our faculty and our staff around those particular points as well. We know, and our students then tell us, not only based on what they say, but what they do, how they feel if our institutions support them. And how we know that is that they don't return. That's how they advocate for themselves, right? We see it as a way that they disengage from the process, that they have other competing priorities that they choose to do and choose to involve them to do. But we don't necessarily ask the question, right? What aren't we doing? And so that's been critical to the work that we're doing with the institution, really coming from this holistic and intentional approach, right? Doing the work in terms of with our students, but more importantly, how we are able to integrate these particular best practices throughout the college. And it's all evidence-based, right? It's not based on what I feel, it's based on what I know and what our students experience. And what I've come to know, just being at the community college of Philadelphia and talking to my students, college is how students experience it. That's it. And so what we need to do is really look at ourselves in that particular way and seeing those things, right? And then be able to tailor our particular services to meet students that we want to, that we are serving, rather than those students that we want to serve. And I think that's the way that we can actually move the needle further.
And so I think Dr. Ray has been involved in this space as well with their Black and Gold program. I know they've got national recognition, and I'll ask him to add to those comments. Ken.
Thank you, Guy. And I just wanted to say to Derek, I'm from Philadelphia. Tampa's much warmer in February. We need to talk.
Absolutely.
That's good morning, everyone. Let me just give you a perspective on Hillsborough Community College in Tampa. We're a large multi-campus comprehensive community college, 5 campuses, 21,000 FTE, around 47,000 students annually. We're a minority serving institution. Black students represent about 19% of our student population, but Black males represent 6% of our total student population. Our Hispanic student population is just over 33%. Our economic impact on Hillsborough County is just over $1 billion, and our president is Dr. Ken Atwater. As it's been mentioned, we know that students, particularly low income and Black African American students, were heavily impacted by the pandemic. But one of the things that we've seen in the data is colleges with the most heavily impacted by the pandemic shutdown were colleges with the highest number of Pell students. Over 50% of HTC students received some form of financial aid. The highest percentage of lost enrollment were with our Black students, African American students, in particular Black males. With the exception of this past summer, Black female enrollment was a little less than our Black male enrollment. Over the summer, our loss in population of Black male students was negative 14% in FTE. In the fall of 2020, we're negative 20% FTE with the same population. And in spring of 2021, this past spring, we were down 16%. And according to the data from the National Student Clearinghouse, when we cross-reference who we lost and where did they go, the majority were not re-enrolled in any other college in the country. So that showed us our work. So we had multiple surveys of non-returning students and students who had just failed to finish the application process. And there were 4 major themes. Financial trouble, navigating the college's system, particularly with campuses closed, an unwillingness or inability, and you've heard for some of the reasons why, but an unwillingness or inability to take courses online, and then personal issues that were some related to the pandemic, like illness, and others not related, like taking care of siblings or elderly parents or so forth. Some of the things that we've been doing, and we look at this from a standpoint of retention, outreach and access, and professional development. In the retention area, we're doubling our efforts right now to attract low-income first-generation students in our TRIO Student Support Services program with a focus on Black male students. We're continuing our award-winning Hope Scholars and the Collegiate 100 program. All this is under the umbrella, as Guy mentioned, of our concept of Black, Brown, and College Bound. So the Hope Scholars program supports Black and Latino male students, providing social, educational, and mentoring programs. Each Hope Scholar is paired with a faculty member. Students and faculty meet regularly, and students participate in professional development programs. Students earn scholarships each semester as part of their participation in the program. The graduation rate for the Hope Scholars program is on par with Phi Theta Kappa and our TRIO Student Support Services program in the high 80s and 90s. All the students seeking an AA degree transfer to a 4-year college and university, and that's part of the goal. Our Collegiate 100 program is a partnership with Tampa's chapter of 100 Black Men of America. The program focuses on education, economic development, health, leadership, and mentoring. The program has helped many of our students stay engaged with the college and learn effective leadership skills. To assist students with staying on path, you heard earlier about our implementation of EduNav. It's our new academic advising system, and as you heard, it demonstrates for students a clear academic pathway to graduation. It really came in handy as we were going into the pandemic and you know, we were, as I like to say, we were retreating to home to conduct our work. Having an academic advising at the fingertips of all of our students was very helpful. Also, a few years ago, the college entered into a partnership with our local university, University of South Florida, and in Tallahassee, Florida, A&M, FAMU, to create guaranteed admission programs. We call the one with the University of South Florida is called Fuse, and the one with FAMU is called Ignite. This helps students start at the community college and have a guaranteed admission into the program or the major of their choice at both of these universities. Students who graduate with an associate arts degree in the Fuse track have opportunities to earn scholarships upon transferring to the University of South Florida. With regard to access and outreach, this year we partnered with the school district to have academic advisors or recruiters at every high school at least once a week to assist students with enrolling at HTC. That's something we hope that we will continue throughout the year, throughout this academic year. We conducted a similar project some years ago and ran it for about 6-7 years with a Title I high school, and I think Dr. Height would call them a off-track school. Title I high school a few years ago to help. It was a wraparound program around the junior and senior class to help them access HCC, and we saw a tremendous rise in number of applications, FAFSAs completed, and the number of students who enrolled in that particular high school. We have an outreach program to area churches. It's called HCC Life. Life stands for Linking in Fellowship and Education. It's an outreach to faith-based organizations and particularly Black churches in our community. It's now a network of about 90 churches, and we partner with the pastors and others in the church to help young people as well as adults connect to HCC and enroll. On the professional development, it was mentioned earlier about the middle college. HCC has a very strong high school dual enrollment program. It's highly promoted and extremely popular because of the collegiate academies that we developed between HCC and the school district and our high schools. Over the last 4 years, approximately 400 high school students have graduated with an associate of arts degree. At the same time, they received their high school diploma, very similar to what they're doing in Philadelphia with the middle college. And I've been impressed at graduation how many African-American male students have taken advantage of this option and accelerated their education. And in Florida, dual enrollment is free to families, so it's been a huge savings for many parents. I'm one of those parents that dual enrollment was a huge savings for. To increase college readiness, we've had the college outreach program for a number of years. We call that CROP. It's for students from middle. It helps students from middle through high school prepare to come to college, whether they're going to HCC or another college or university. It's similar to Upward Bound, where it offers academic enhancement instruction, college exploration, and personal development program to middle and high school students. And many of these students are African-American male students. On the professional development front, and Guy mentioned it earlier, for the last 14 years, up until just before the pandemic, actually, we have hosted the annual National Black, Brown, and College Bound Conference, which is dedicated to sharing best practices to increase access, retention, and college completion for Black and Latino males. The conference is for educational professionals as well as students. And this year, the conference, we're going to resume the conference. And yes, we're going to resume the conference, and it would be this March 2nd through the 5th. So those are some of the things that we're doing at HCC, and we hope to expand on these things as we move forward and recognizing how the pandemic has really impacted particularly our Black male students.
So I have another round of questions, or, you know, an area of conversation. But before we do that, why don't we pause and see if there's questions or comments from this august body of educators here. I'm sure you all have thoughts about what's been said, and if nothing, then we'll just go on to the final phase of this, which is to discuss solutions. Any comments or questions?
Well, Guy, as folks type in their questions, there is one question that I can ask, and it's about relationships. And that's what I heard a lot from the panel today. I'm reminded of a video of a focus group from CESI that we did a while back. We interviewed a Black student, and his statement is so notable because he says, I chose this community college because this is the only place that said yes to me. Think about the depth of that statement of that student where he felt like he didn't belong or he wasn't given opportunities, but he felt hopeful at the community college. And so this could be for all the panelists, but I know Derek spoke about it, Ken spoke about it, Derek, you spoke about the support coaches in your program, how you connect those to students. Ken, you spoke about the Hope Scholars Program, how students are connected to mentors. If you can briefly tell us about how do you identify those mentors and connect them to those students? How do you put them together?
Some of the mentors were some were invited, and others volunteered to be part of the program.
Dr. Ray, can I jump in on that one as well?
Yes, let me introduce Ms. Sheila McCants, she is our director of TRIO Student Support Services, but in a previous world, not too long ago, she was the convener of the Hope Scholars Program. Sheila McCants.
Thank you. With the Hope Scholars and pairing mentors, we do have mentors who volunteer, but we make a concerted effort to go to faculty in services and explain what the program is and what the role of the mentor is. So it gets pretty intensive in terms of what we're looking for when recruiting. And then when pairing them, I think it's Frank Harris and Luke Wood said, don't just put people together just, from a list, that you have to, we do an engagement activity happens so that we can see where the natural gravitation is for the mentor to the student and the student to the mentors. And then it sort of manifests itself naturally. And that's how people are paired from that point. Some of our mentors take on, we hope in a perfect world that there would be one mentor for every student. The world is not perfect. So some take on 2, maybe even 3. We try not to go over 3 because then you're not really mentoring, you're just sort of engaging a group. And so it's hard to form those kinds of relationships that you were discussing if you have too many.
Thank you, Sheila.
So I have a question. I don't know if you're familiar with the work Relationship Rich Education by Felton and Lambert. So expanding that beyond the mentorship, because we all know that we would love to have a mentor for every single student on our campus, and that's just not reasonable. So what kind of work maybe are you doing within your institutions to expand that web of relationship building beyond faculty and mentors and advisors, just to develop that whole culture throughout the institution?
Derek, you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing in terms of mentors and the real talk and I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do is on a monthly basis, we host a real talk session. And so what we do is we bring in mentors from external mentors and business partners that we've already established relationships with. We bring them on campus, but now we resume. And we talk about issues that are impacting and affecting Black males of color, Black males and other male students of color in particular. So we talk about issues from masculinity to voting, to police violence and oppression, to relationship development. And what we do is to have this kind of intergenerational approach, right? And so that we all have experienced different things at different times and have different vantage points in terms of how we were able to not only understand, but how we were able to acknowledge our particular traumas, right? And create a space where we can talk about those particular things and recognize that we all have these type of connections. It is important that we all create this safe place, particularly because we often know that we are not, what our program really is designed to do is really to do what we've not been socially told to do, right, is to be ourselves and to talk and allow ourselves to be vulnerable, particularly as related to some of the issues that are barriers for our success. And so what we want to do is create this space where it's non-judgmental and is vulnerable. And we talk about real issues that are impacting our students. It's one of the most empowering and actually one of our flagship initiatives, because people are talking, right? Because we're taking the safe space. And not only that we're talking, but we also come into some point of resolution, right? So it's just a matter of talking just for the sake of talking. But now that we have addressed these particular issues, now that we have acknowledged these particular issues, how are we going to formally address them in our particular lives, right? And then hold ourselves accountable for those particular things. And so just to know who's there, right, in the room. So Dr. Jennifer, right, is a part of these particular sessions, right? And it's important that our students in particular sees the president of the institution taking the opportunities to talk with them, particularly without the role of a president, but just as another Black male in the room and talking about those particular experiences. And so we're removing those kind of barriers. We're talking about issues that impact us, but more importantly, we're creating safe place in this and modeling what this can actually look like. So not only we're doing it in this particular environment, so now students now have a blueprint of how they could do that in their homes, right? When they're talking to their family members or their peers in ways that is affirming and supporting, right? And that we're listening to understand and not listening to reply, right? We're also talking about different diversity issues. And so we really challenge ourselves to be different and to think different. And the only ways that we can do that is if we model those particular behaviors. And because we create this kind of dynamic within our mentoring circle, these are how our mentor matches are formed. So I know Sheila was just mentioning, Dr. McCants, I'm sorry, was just mentioning just in terms of, that making sure that we're just not matching for matching sake. The students can see where there are different alliances or different experiences, different connections that can be made. And so some of these are done organically and some that are done through the process just based on these kind of experiences. And what we found is that now students understand that their circle is much larger, right? And there's one more person at least that cares about them and is willing to have those conversations, courageous conversations with them in order for them to be able to be more successful, not only at college, but in their lives.
Guy, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. And so and Lauren, I'd like to question about the relationships and creating relationships. And Derek reminded all of us early on that we have these institutions, K-12 and higher ed, that have historically been created to continue the work of the institution, not necessarily to respond to the young people we serve. And I think as we think forward, we have to think about how do we respond to what young people are telling us they need, either telling us directly or telling us through the demonstration of behaviors and other types of things. And so at least here at the school district, we've thought about this in two ways. One, when we all went remote, we had opportunities for young people to have a student advisory. They come on the student advisory and all they wanted was a community again to talk, right? And so Derek talked about the notion of real talk, but they just wanted a community to talk. And then we talked about all of the things that we were trying to do for them. And their response was that many of those things are not going to do for them what we think it's going to do for them. So we created what was called Yo Philly. It's YO Philly, and it's run by students, and then the students actually lead those conversations with other students. But more importantly, for our Black males, we had an Office of Student Leadership that is now ventured out to become an office that is responsive and supportive just of Black males. And it's the Office of Black Male Engagement now that actually is working with young people so that we will have an environment in which we can protect the types of conversations that Derek just described. And then finally, I think for all of us and in higher ed and K-12, it is rethinking how we utilize resources that in some cases may already be available. And I think about it from the perspective of like everyone was advocating for a lot more counseling, and the young people were telling us that like the traditional counseling is always helpful, but in some cases that's not what they needed. They needed a different type of counseling where they could talk to individuals about things that were going on, personal types of things. And that's why we came up with like some of the behavioral health things. But in addition to that, we also have some 300 school safety officers. Many of these school safety officers live in the communities, have attended our schools. And so we have now taken those individuals out of uniform, trained those individuals, and they're still going through that training on how to lead restorative circles. Many of those individuals have become the mentors, particularly for our middle school students, thinking about this before those young people get into high schools, but also training those individuals on how to have questions and how to respond to things about equity, diversity, race, so that those individuals become another resource in the school that young people will also be able to engage with and have at their disposal. And so I just think about it from the perspective of, if we're serious about responding to what we are hearing from our young people, then how do we then change the way we use the resources, in some cases we already have, to be responsive, more responsive to what those young people need. And the reason why, and I submit, the reason why in the middle college model, young people were so successful was because we, with Guy and his team and my team, then developed the support structures for those young people. Because it wasn't just getting them through the class, it was also helping them to navigate a college experience that they had not experienced before, especially when you're 13 and you're entering college. So they had not had that experience. And remember, I said they're first generation. And so they couldn't rely on family members or parents or siblings to do it because they're the first ones who are having that experience. And in cities like the city of Philadelphia, where every one of my 137,000 children receive free and reduced lunch, then we have lots of individuals that will need that type of added support for, to be successful through colleges and or universities. And so particularly and especially our Black males, because they hear college and think about something that has always been representative of something that is not attainable for them. And we have to make sure they know that with support, we actually can create the conditions where that will be a much more successful experience. And so I loved hearing Derek describe what they've done at the community college. And Derek, I want to make sure I connect you to Tyler Weems, who's doing that work here in the school district of Philadelphia as well. His beard is almost just like yours as well.
It's my quarantine beard.
And Ken, I think you want to expand on that as well.
Yes, I just wanted to applaud Guy and Dr. Generals and Dr. Height for the partnership that you have created between the community college and the school district. We found that to be extremely an accelerator of different projects and things that we've done in Hillsborough County, as we were able to partner and tighten our partnership with our school district. So it's nice to see you both working, arm in arm on these issues. I just wanted to applaud both of you for doing that.
There was a question. I know, Linda, are you?
Oh, go ahead.
It will likely be, what about misinformation, COVID vaccination, et cetera? And that caught my eye because that's what we're dealing with now. We are going, we started a series we refer to as Enough is Enough, where we bring in professionals to talk about topical issues. It began with the George Floyd and the social unrest that was happening, to give a safe space for students, faculty, and staff, everybody. We're a community of learners, if you will, on those particular topics. And they've been quite successful throughout the year. And so one of them that's coming up will deal with the misinformation about COVID-19. Trying to get our students vaccinated. Most of our faculty and staff have, but we're still struggling with the students. A lot of misinformation out there. So we're bringing in 2 physicians. I think Dr. Ayla is going to be one of them. She's already done one. She's got national attention for the work that she's doing here in Philadelphia. But a couple of weeks ago, Philadelphia is suffering not only from a pandemic of this virus, but also a pandemic of gun violence. And a couple of weeks ago, we had one on gun violence where we had, some police officers, we had emergency room physicians, and folks who are dealing with this on the front line. We have a project here at the school that is it's externally funded, but it's based in journalism. And the idea is to get the voices of those who are living around these incidents of gun violence to be the ones to articulate what's happening, as opposed to the Inquirer or the Tribune. Students who understand the source, where it's coming from, and what the impact on the communities are. So that's been quite. And the theory is, if we could change the narrative on gun violence, that would lead to different outcomes, some kind of different outcomes relative to that. So it's about safe space. I think Bill and Derek have said the same thing. We got to listen to our learners, our students. We can't assume this can't just be a top-down banking model, if you will. We have to hear what they're saying, because their communities are stressed, and they know what's going on in those communities. And for us to establish programs or curriculum or pedagogical strategies, we really need to know what their life circumstances and experiences are, and how we can form and help them to become learners.
Yeah, Guy, there's 5 questions on the same thing, and I'll ask to all the panel. It's about recruitment and getting Black students motivated to come to the college, and especially to participate in the programs that were discussed today. But there was this one question, especially, how do you help Black students who heavily depend on work to support families and attend school, but are now reluctant to choosing going to work or not work or go to college? How do you engage that population?
So I'll start, and then you guys can jump in. There's no absolute answer to that. I can tell you that the unique aspect of a community college is you can do both. You can work and go to college. But I think we have to commit resources for both recruitment and retention. We have to commit resources for students who want to come to college and still have basic social, familial needs relative to their ability to come to college. So that's everything from transportation to childcare to, again, basic needs. And we've put a lot of focus on that. We've partnered with the Philadelphia Housing Authority to provide housing for students that are in need, especially foster care students, most of whom are Black males. They are emancipated and they've got nothing, literally nothing. The federal stimulus dollars for us has been very helpful. We've been able to forgive the loans for close to 3,500 students. So that can add to their analysis as to whether or not they're ready to come back to school and how they can do that. We're exploring ideas where we can develop job opportunities to extend our workforce program through federal stimulus dollars. So that's something that we're exploring. And then, of course, in Philadelphia, the mayor, committed big time to free community college. So students can come here and not pay tuition if they graduated from a Philadelphia high school. But with all of that said, recruitment really is about being proactive, going into those communities. We can't wait. We're not the Ivy Tower on the hill. We have to go into those communities and talk to them where they are and help them understand how, if you want to get out of this situation you are right now, it's not going to happen by accident. There needs to be steps that can be taken. And here's how you can take those steps. This is what we can do to help you with those steps.
Linda, I'll go ahead and add to Guy's points. I mentioned in my presentation the wraparound program that we were doing with a Title I high school. And one of the things that, getting to Guy's point, one of the things that was critical is we were actually, initially, we started with somebody who was a sort of an activist type in the community that was associated with that high school. And we actually hired as a contract this person to be a facilitator between HCC and then the high school and those high school juniors and seniors to facilitate some of the programming that we were doing. Not only did she work with the students, she worked with the faculty and the administration there, and she worked with individual students' parents to help them understand what we were doing and what we were trying to do, and the importance of their student, at least even if they didn't think they were going to attend, at least fill out the FAFSA and do the application, and then you can make a decision later. And that turned out to be very helpful for us, because later on we were our staff were more engaged with that school, and we didn't need that person anymore to do that, because we had established a very strong relationship with that school. And that has led to our president coming to us this year and saying, I've worked with the superintendent of schools, and we'd like to put an advisor in every school at least once a week to help students make that transition and to do some of the things that we were doing in what we call the College Bound Initiative. And so that has been extremely helpful. And like I said, we're hoping that will continue. But that was going back to that relationship between the school district and the community college. The stronger that has been, the stronger we've been able to try to recruit students, particularly African American male students in the communities where they live.
If I could just, I'm sorry, I don't mean to monopolize.
Sure, no, go ahead, Guy.
That's a great point, and I think Bill mentioned taking advantage of resources that already exist. And we're going to do that. Philadelphia is loaded with organizations that deal with young Black men. You know, everything from, there's basketball leagues that we're looking at, where young men of color primarily, and they have a tutorial, college bound component to that. The mayor's office has an office of Black male engagement. We've reestablished we've begun to reestablish and talk with the prisons. There's hundreds of kids in there that just did something stupid and can't find their way out. And we think the community college is their answer. So I don't know, Derek, you want to?
Yeah.
This is the college committed $1 million to do this work. We came up with $1 million to extend what Derek is doing, and part of which is recruiting, finding these students.
Absolutely. So just in addition to what you mentioned, Dr. General, as well as Ken, Dr. Ray, just in terms of recruitment, two other things that we also that I think is important. As we're recruiting, we are recruiting particularly with Black males, but also as we're doing so, we're doing that through this as they've seen this, through this kind of racialized and gender lens, right? So when we are recruiting for our students, even though I know Dr. Hyde is trying to do an almond job in creating safe places for students, particularly Black males from the K-12 system, but we know just based on the data that Black males are over-disciplined, right? At those particular college, through the K-12 system. That some of the programming and supports that they're not getting are not necessarily culturally responsive to meet their particular needs. And so if they're coming from a K-12 system that has been oppressive to them, why would college be any different, right? And so as we're doing recruitment, we're allowing our students to know, one, just getting a sense of how they experience that K-12 experience and trying to relate how those experiences will be different in college in terms of the support that they receive and the connections that they will have. And so I think it's important that we determine that, because how they perceive their educational experience will just translate into the college experience as well. So if we don't address it in that particular way, then we're not going to be able to not only get our students in the door, but also keep them retained. Also, too, one of our recruitment strategies is we go to their influencers, right? So we go to the churches, we talk to the grandmoms, we talk to the moms, right? We go to connect with fraternities and sororities. We go to the barbershops, we go to the community centers, we go to the prisons. We go to where our students are, and more importantly, those people who have a direct influence on with our Black males who may be interested in coming to college, so that they too can kind of demystify the college experience for them, and be able to make it much more successful for them to be even consider college as an option. And so those are definitely some of those recruitment strategies that we do. And we also making sure that they have one point of contact, which is important for our students. So once they end college, have interest, they know they could go to one person who will be able to navigate the whole system for them. What we often see with our students is that, particularly if students have any kind of issues in thinking about college or whether college is for me, they come in with this kind of confirmation bias. And if one thing confirms their belief that the college isn't supporting them, then it gives them a reason not to even pursue college. And so we want to make sure that we have at least one point person for that student and be able to navigate. So that point person is not going to tell them, oh, go to certain office. That person is going to walk them to that certain office and hand them off to that particular person to make sure that they understand that, one, there's a connection that's being made. And we know too that particularly when we provide information just due to circumstance and other things, that people may not be as willing to reach out due to rejection and all these other pieces. And so those are some of our other kind of retention and recruitment efforts that I wanted to talk about. But as relates to this work, right, it's important that the institutions support this work. And from my standpoint, your budget reflects your values. So Dr. Jenner has been very intentional, just making sure that the work that we're doing is sustainable, right? And is fully funded to be able to do this work, understanding what the data is saying and that these are making data and evidence-driven decisions. And more importantly, that we're saving Black lives as a result of this particular work. And so with that, making sure too, that we have the kind of the appropriate allocations so that we can do the type of recruitment, that we could do the type of programming, that we could do the type of training that is necessary, not only for our staff and for our students, but also the faculty as well. And so how we're expanding this, we definitely look at it much more holistically and really being able to integrate these kind of best practices into our institution. Because what was happening and what has a tendency to happen, particularly when you have boutique programs such as programs that are serving Black males or Black males initiatives, right, is that particular program is seen as primary responsible for the outcomes of those particular students, right? Not that the students are part of, and what I tell my students is that you're not a CME student, you're a CCP student, right? And so everyone at this institution is accountable for you being persistent, for your academic outcomes, for feeling your sense of belonging and feeling affirmed and valued on this campus. And so those are the things that has had to happen in order for us to change and become this really anti-racist in a lot of ways, right? But also student-centered institution. And the last thing I just want to say, because I want to monopolize the time, is we have to be acknowledged, right? Racism exists. And at any kind of institution, right, is embedded in all of our particular institutions. And because of that, we know that if we're not holding ourselves accountable, aware, or acknowledge those particular things, then we could just replicate those particular systemic oppressions, right, in our students, and then wonder why they're not there. But because we are replicating exactly what they already experiencing. And so I get off my soapbox and send off to someone else.
Ken, you had a question for Guy?
Well, one, I just, as a born and raised Philadelphian, I really appreciate what Community College of Philadelphia and the school district are doing. And I was very encouraged last time I was there to see an advertisement, marketing material in Mount Airy, advocating students come to school and come to the college and come there for free. So, kudos to Guy and your team. Have you considered second chance Pell, Pell for incarcerated individuals?
So I don't know that it exists formally. Maybe you know something that I do. I know that there were some experimental efforts.
Yeah, that's what I was getting. Were you part of that experimental
when I
group?
first arrived at the college, this was during the Barack Obama era. we couldn't apply because we had a warning. My first day on the job, I got a letter from Middle States that said, "Welcome to CCP. Here's your warning for accreditation for assessment." So it took us 2 years to get off of that. But during that time is when they were doing these pilots for Second Chance Pell. I'm a strong proponent of it. As you know, we've all been fighting for higher ed reauthorization, which has been on the table for God knows how long, 10 years or whatever. And I know that that's part of it. But I know for a place like Philadelphia, for us to really deal with these issues that we've been talking about, Second Chance Pell has to be a part of it. Because if a student, gets caught up on a corner somewhere or selling, marijuana or something, or drugs, or, somehow gets a felony, their chances of getting financial aid are slim to none. So we put a lot of effort, as I'm sure many of you do, in raising private dollars to be able to help them as much as possible. And, the Cattle Scholarship is a last dollar scholarship. So there are still dollars. If they don't qualify for financial aid, they could still apply and get other dollars. But it's an issue. Finances is an issue. So I'm a big proponent. I know this isn't supposed to be political, for Joe Biden's, American Family Rescue Plan, which includes free community college. I do think it's an issue. Time has come. As an educational historian, we all know that 100 years ago, high schools cost. If you didn't have the money to go to an academy or a private school, there were hardly no public high schools. So the idea that you need at least 14, 15 years of education, some post-secondary education, is really part of the answer to, what we're talking about, specifically Black males, but also in general,
Yes.
The economy of this country.
Hey, guys, so just real quickly, I want to go back to Dr. Garcia's question about I think it was in the chat that said, if students are working, and then how do you recruit them if in fact they want to continue to work? And I think one of the fallacies in how we're thinking about this is treating it as an either or, when we should be thinking about it as both and, right? So that, and creating structures that allow them to continue to work as they are able to go to college. And if we think about workforce development more broadly, we actually want them to have that experience as they are actually learning the theoretical work and the work that they will have to do around developing the skills and competencies. To the other points, and oh, by the way, just on a soapbox issue, since other people got on one as well, and if we're talking about anti-racism, we also have to think about livable wages for individuals. Particularly, we can't expect young Black males to go to work for $7 an hour, $8 an hour, when they can stand on a corner somewhere and do a lot better than that. And if we're going to be very serious about it, we need to get that to a livable wage and make sure that they understand that we are acknowledging the importance of those individuals who are doing the work. But I'll just add, as one of the things that we're trying to do in the K-12 system in order to prepare young people to be more eligible for the Pell types of work, and this is in response to Dr. Ray's point, is that we've actually gone to a rest diversion program here in the city of Philadelphia, where we've been able to dramatically reduce over a 6-year period. I'm talking about in the thousands, the number of children who are coming in contact with the criminal justice system for things that didn't start as crimes. Things started as take your hat off. And then that conflict became a terroristic threat, and then a child was processed and introduced to the criminal justice system. And then the next incident, then they're all of a sudden have a probation officer. Now they are part of that system. So, but we have been able to dramatically reduce the numbers of young people, at least coming out of the K-12 system, unless they commit, that there are a certain category of felonies. If you commit, we can't divert it. But for everything else, we can divert it. And that's the part of retraining staff that we once had in schools to do one thing, that now we need them to do something very different and be responsive and develop relationships and develop opportunities to engage with young people in very different ways.
I know you had some questions, I think, for the panel. We have about 6 minutes left. If you want to go ahead and ask
Yeah,
those.
so we said we would talk about, how do we get out of this pandemic aspect of what we're dealing with? We know that there have been equities and disparities all along, which in large part is what we've talked about, but those disparities and inequities were exacerbated by the pandemic. So what do we do to at least get back to where we were relative to the melt? And I know there's literature out there about, the need to get, there's literature and debate about the degree to which we should return back to the classroom, because of the pandemic and virtual learning. And I know there's a school of thought that virtual learning covers it. Don't worry about it. Let's stay where we are until the virus is gone. There's another school of thought that says that's crazy. We need to get kids back in school. We need to get students back in school. And I have a point of view. We're trying to get there. We think that developmentally speaking is not just about what's on a screen. It's not just about, basic cognitive reading and writing. It's about the full student experience that ultimately enables and helps people to grow. And that can only happen through face-to-face contact. Going back to McKinsey, there's data that say, Black and brown students are 2 times as likely to not even have a full-time teacher or a person, because you can throw curriculum up in a can and the student can open it up and there's no person there. So, the value of virtual, which there are those who think it's the new normal, we don't need face-to-face anymore, versus how important it is to get back to an open school environment. So that, how do we turn this thing around? That's the question to the panel.
Well, Guy, I can speak to some of that or just share with some of the things that we're trying to do at HCC. We were very heavy brick and mortar and trying to grow a distance learning program, which of course expanded during the pandemic. But one of the things that we focused on is trying to give students enough choices for how they were going to complete their degree and so we looked at hybrid, and so we've increased the number of hybrid classes, meaning that there's very limited face-to-face, but it's distance learning and face-to-face, a combination. And one of the things that we've invested a lot of money in and time, particularly in the academic affairs area, are creating simulcast classrooms where you will have students, some at home and some actually face-to-face in a classroom, to make that an option for students. And that's not going to start for us in a limited fashion until the spring of 2022. But that has a whole host of operational issues and instructional issues that they're still working out. So we're just trying to make right now enough options for people to choose how they want to come to HCC and get their degree.
Bill, you're in the newspapers every day. Let us know what's going on, Philadelphia School District.
I'm just trying to keep the pressure off you, Guy. That's all. So, yeah, so here's what we know in the K-12 system, and I can't speak for higher education, but I will say for the K-12 system, for the children in their most impressionable years, and that is grades K through 5, we saw dramatic declines from when they were in person to when they were virtual. And we saw dramatic declines at the time when those young people are learning to read, learning how to identify words and letters, and learning how to and learning the fundamentals of math instruction. And so if that is in fact the case, for us, and the young people, our Black students, were more heavily impacted than everyone else. But I want to make the point that we saw that decline across all demographics and all populations in those age groups. Now we also had some older young people that did okay in the virtual environment. But I think more broadly, some of the things that we've talked about this morning, now this afternoon, are the things, are reasons why we need young people back. I mean, and this notion of like the dealing with trauma from the extended isolation that was a result of COVID, I think is a real challenge. And then you add on that the loss of loved ones, during the pandemic, the heightened gun violence, at least here, and domestic violence, at least here in Philadelphia, the impacts of systemic racism and other social injustices that individuals have now seen front and center locally and nationally. And if in fact students are in front of me, as an old high school principal, when I could look at a student and tell when that young person was not having a good day. And then I could intervene in a way that hopefully kept that young person from creating more trouble for himself, herself, or others. In a virtual environment, you cannot do that, right? And so I do think that it is extremely important, particularly at the K-12 level, to get young people back into some form of, into face-to-face instruction, to create those, reestablish those communities so that the community is just not the group of individuals that I'm engaging with on social media, but reestablishing those communities, reestablishing the supports and interventions and enrichment opportunities if necessary, and the counseling opportunities if in fact young people are in crisis, and reestablish those routines so that we just don't have individuals logging in and then going back to bed, but logging in and getting up to go somewhere and be ready to come to school to engage, just like we wanted those young people to engage in the past, and just like we're going to want them to engage in the future. I think there are lots of things that we learned during the pandemic and lots of things that we can add now as options to expose more children to opportunities. But by and large, we need to get young people back, and that's what we intend to do in the fall. So we're bringing everybody back in person, full day, 5 days a week, and we will see how it goes from there.
That's great. So we're at the bewitching hour. I want to give a personal thanks to Bill for joining us today. I know he's incredibly busy dealing with the multitude of issues. I want to thank Derek Perkins and certainly all of my colleagues from NACT for coming in. I see some CCP people there too, so I want to thank them. But I'd like to flip it over to Ken, who I think is going to give closing remarks. So thank you all.
We just really appreciate, and you sort of did that, Guy, but we really appreciate having Dr. Haidt and you and Derek with your presentations, and Linda for doing such a wonderful good job. That's all right. Moderating, and this is just a topic that it's going to be good for ongoing discussion. I'm hoping that on a personal level that we can do it in a much broader audience, maybe at Black Brown College Bound in Tampa in March. And if anyone would like any information about the National Alliance, please feel free to contact us. And we're just very happy to have this opportunity to discuss this topic. And thank you. And Linda, do you want to bring it home?
Thank you, everybody, for joining. Stay tuned for some of the more work that these panels will be doing, and getting connection with NACTC. We hope to see you soon.
Next time it's face-to-face, though. I'm done with this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We'll see you in Florida.
Take care. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. We appreciate it.